In today's episode, Sean and I dive into the latest real estate trends to find out how prices, sales, and inventory are shaping the market in 2024. Stay tuned as we break down the numbers and explore the dynamics of different price ranges. Let's get started. Thanks for pressing play. You're listening to the Broady Windsor Group on real estate, the podcast for homeowners seeking guidance and support on everything related to owning a home. This includes much more than just buying or selling. We've got you covered for everything from mortgages and financing to home maintenance tips, renovation and design advice, and of course, the latest insights and analysis on what's happening in our local communities. So I was looking at the stats report that you just did the other day, Sean, looking at, first half of the year versus last year, and wanted to ask you sort of what are you seeing in the market in the different price ranges out there?
Well, I think I was pretty pleasantly surprised about the 2024 numbers. I looked back from January to June, what we've been seeing in the West Islands. I'll look at West Island single family homes.
Yeah.
Kind of the majority of our clientele, I would say. Prices are up about 3% compared to the same period last year. The number of sales is up, and inventory is up. So it's interesting. Like, we've seen more homes come on the market, even more than we had in 2020 pre-COVID. Obviously, during COVID, we had very, very low inventory. So we've started to see more homes come on the market. But this year, it seems that buyer confidence, even though interest rates are double what they were a year and a half ago, buyer confidence is very high, and people are buying homes. Now, asterisks, they're not buying homes in all price ranges. I looked carefully at different value ranges because I think somewhere that is a little bit different this year is the luxury market.
And define luxury market.
Well, 1.5 million and above, because with the increase in property values through COVID, what was 800,000 is now 1.3, 1.4. So I'd say up to 1.5 are your larger executive family homes, 2-car garage, 4 bedrooms upstairs, ensuite bathroom. Like, that value range is now $1 million to 1.5.
Right.
There's a lot of those, and those are still selling quite well. That under 1.5 market is active. Under $1 million, extremely active. Okay. Still suffering from low inventory, seeing multiple offers on homes that are priced well, that are in good locations, and that show well. But like in all markets, there's a lot of inventory that's just sitting there. The leftovers, and those are not getting any attention from buyers. So either they're not in a great location, they don't show well, they have crappy pictures, they're not staged, and the price is too high. So,
Yeah. So perfect example. I've been working with some buyers recently in that, that price range of, $700,000 to $800,000 range, and exactly to your point, the comment was, there's inventory, but not a ton of inventory out there, and there's a lot that I don't really like that I think is overpriced, and the ones that I do like, that I think are well priced, they're going really quick. Like, just last week, we went into one, was on the market for 2 days, had like 35 visits over the weekend and 11 offers. So, and then you have others that have been sitting there for 3 months. And so we lost out on that multiple offer, circled back to one that we'd been sort of keeping an eye on that had been overpriced in our opinion and in my client's opinion, and went back in there and and were able to negotiate. And
get it for a good price.
And get it for a good price, right? So I think that's sort of what we're seeing is a real, split between, like you said, the well-priced homes that are in good condition, that don't need a ton of work. They're very competitive.
Super competitive. So I think buyers have to be very well prepared to get in on those, right?
So great point. So the clients that we were working with, first-time home buyers didn't really have a super clear sense of what all the steps were in the process, what to expect. Oh my God, what happens if we're in a multiple offer? So we had to really take it slow with them and, walk them through the steps, really use that client portal, really effectively to show them what things have been selling for. So keeping them up to date on, that one that you saw, you went to the open house last week. Well, they just got an offer, or this one just sold, the one that you saw, a month ago, it's now come in. Here's the firm sale price. Oh, okay. That gives me a better idea now on the ones I'm looking at today based on what you're telling me has just sold. So
what changed in their opinion of the market based on doing that research with them?
They basically told us that you helping to educate us made a huge difference. One, in our confidence level that we weren't overpaying, whereas previously we would have thought that was way too much, and we would have come in with an offer much, much lower, and we wouldn't have had a chance of getting that property, right? So after going through this process, after seeing the sold alerts, after going through, a multiple offer situation, and then seeing what the results were, they were then much better prepared, more confident, and doing the due diligence on a home. We actually went through that process too, a building inspection, getting quotes from contractors. Like, these are all things they had no idea about, and how to then use that information to negotiate the best possible price with the seller, who probably had some unrealistic expectations because they'd got a multiple offer early on when they first listed, but then had issues with building inspection and had 2 buyers walk away.
So that's why I needed the contractor quotes.
So
how much is it going to cost to fix all these little defects? Nothing was deal breaker, all manageable, but played into the price.
Exactly. And so again, being able to lean on our service providers from the Homeowner Advisory Directory, we were able to get really quick turnarounds on these quotes, so that our clients were really comfortable now that they knew exactly what they were going to have to spend once they firmed up this sale, and they were comfortable then going in with this price, and then we used that obviously in negotiations, and so the outcome was they got their offer accepted. So there's a perfect example.
Yeah, great example. Being prepared, being educated, the educated buyer. Because if they hadn't had that education, they were lowballing properties and they wouldn't have got anything.
Yeah, exactly.
It would have taken them 3 or 4 before they realized, oh, well, the market's a little bit hotter than I anticipated, right? So there's a misconception out there, right? People think the market is a little bit cooler than it actually is, and it depends on the price range. Whereas I'm working with a buyer at $2 million.
Different story.
It's a completely different education. It's a buyer's market. There is a lot of inventory. Like I was looking at it this morning, a lot of inventory as you climb towards 2 million and above. More inventory now than there was 3 years ago, and so buyers have a ton of choice, and a lot of stuff that's on the market is sort of priced what I would call like speculative pricing. Like, you've got sellers who are not super motivated, who are trying to testing the market at higher prices. And what we're seeing from buyers is a little bit different than during the pandemic when interest rates were 2%. They're very, very, very careful about what they will offer on. And we're seeing them being a little skittish. Like, they make an offer on something, seller gives them an aggressive counter, they just walk away. Like, there's no sense of urgency. Right? So I think in that price range, there are move-up buyers who are saying, like, I have a house I'm comfortable in. I'm in a financial position where I can buy. This was an example of one that we dealt with. And I can buy without selling my house. But, I don't think the house is worth what the seller might be asking. It's tough, So they're going to negotiate hard, and the seller is going to be disappointed. But it's all about price versus patience. Like, the seller may say, well, I'm not motivated enough to accept that lower price. I'll wait and hope that the market gets better, that more luxury buyers move into the market later in the year as smaller homes sell, which is typically what happens. That luxury market tends to get going later in the year. So the pricing element is very important in the luxury.
And you mentioned to me earlier too, in the higher end luxury markets, over 1.5 or over 2 million, it's not necessarily that there's less sales. Like, probably the number of sales has been pretty consistent. except for a couple of years where there was an outlier in terms of a real spike in sales. But the number of sales has been pretty consistent in that price range. It's just the inventory and number of listings available is much higher now than
Much higher. Exactly. Like if we just take an overview of it, 2022 was the hottest year for luxury. We had the most sales over 2 million that we've ever had in the last 5 years and ever, because of course, price appreciation, more homes got pushed up into that value range. But if you go back and look at like 2019, 2020, this year, 2024, January to June, we've had 4 sales over 2 million in the West Island, which seems like a really small number, but pretty comparable. Let me go back and look at what I had here. 2 to 2.5 million. 2024, 4 sales, January to June. 2023, 2 sales. 2022, which was our banner year, 11 sales. Definitely an outlier. 2021, 6 sales. 2020, 4 sales, which is the same as this year. In 2019, only 1 sale.
So what would your advice then be to sellers in that price range?
Well, I think it requires some patience in that price range. I don't think homes are moving super quickly. I think if you get an offer, I think you should be very serious about entertaining the offer and trying not to be too aggressive, because you're not in the position of power.
Buyers have the upper hand.
Buyers have the upper hand. So I think you have to just remember that in your negotiation. And I think maybe some sellers need to lower their expectations a little bit if they intend to be sold in a 60, 90,
reasonable amount of time.
3-4 month period. If they're happy to wait, by all means, test the market. Sometimes the buyer may come in and make an offer, but
so then what would the advice be to a buyer in that price range?
Well, I think a buyer in that price range is in a nice position. They've got an upper hand. They've got quite a bit of choice. Mind you, when you then start to really look at the different areas where those homes are located, I'm looking at the whole West Island. So there's luxury stuff in Ile-Bizard. There's big homes in West Park, Dollard. There's huge homes in Dorval. There's waterfronts all over. But if you have a specific neighborhood you want to look in, there might not be a ton of inventory to look at. If you find one you like, well, I think you have the option to try and negotiate a good price based on recent sales data and stick to that rather than just paying whatever the seller is asking.
Right.
And that just comes down to doing research, doing your homework, being well informed, being educated, just like in any price range.
But like you said, it also comes down to, how often does a home like that come around? And sometimes if that checks all your boxes and it's that ideal location, well, then you may have to, bump up that offer a little bit to match the seller's expectations.
Well, yeah, that's the definition of market value.
Yeah.
What a seller is willing to accept and a buyer is willing to pay. So if you can meet there.
Now let's shift gears and jump back down to the lower price ranges for a second, because it's not always, your multiple offer situations. We're seeing many, many different types of situations where, for example, homes that are maybe stretching, in what we call, rolling the dice. We want to test it a little bit higher than what we had recommended was, sweet spot market value. And we think that there's enough buyers out there that we're going to be able to get a little bit closer. And then what happens if you get lots of visits in that first 2 weeks in the market, but the offers don't materialize?
Yeah, well, generally the market's speaking to you, right? If you're in a hot area and you have a nice home and you don't have a ton of competition and you've had lots of visits and you've been on the market for 2-3 weeks and you haven't had an offer, generally what the market is telling you is your price is probably too high. So you're then chasing the market. Rather than if you priced it more aggressively, and again, if you're in the right value range to do this and you priced it aggressively, you could generate a quick offer, which could trigger a second quick offer from another party who was interested, which is kind of what we saw during the pandemic. Like, we've experienced this. We just had a home in Kirkland that was priced just under $1 million. It's in that hot area. It's a great Kirkland Southwest location, nice backyard with a pool right next to a park. Priced, just under that $1 million cutoff. And first week on the market, had a bunch of showings, materialized into 2 offers, and they got one of the offers accepted. Close to asking, not at asking, not over, but a number that sellers were very happy with. So, it just depends on what kind of home you have that you're putting out there as to whether you'll get that interest. And if you don't, then you might want to look at adjusting the price quickly rather than waiting 2 months to adjust the price.
And I would say to that, the price is a very important component, but it's not the only piece. And I think we've had a few examples recently where the story that we can tell around that property and the marketing that goes along with it can help tremendously in finding that ideal buyer, that needle in a haystack, right? So we had one recently where very cute little bungalow in Beaconsfield South, but it needed some work. It needed some TLC, and people had to be willing to put some money into it. And we had consistent visits, over the first 2 weeks. But the feedback was, really like that neighborhood in that area, but I'm not sure I'm willing to put in the work that's required to get it to what I would really like. But it was the story around, that property, which would be ideal for a first time, young family living in a great neighborhood, and really painting the picture for them that this is what it would be like to live there. And yes, you're going to have to put some work in, but you can do these things slowly over time. That really helped identify that ideal buyer that sort of pictured themselves like, this is exactly what I'm looking for. And maybe I'm going to have to stretch a little bit from my initial budget, but there was an emotional attachment. They walked in there and said, this just feels like home. And that makes a big difference.
For sure.
So now let's talk about the different types of buyers and sellers, right? And I think a demographic we're all dealing with right now quite a bit are downsizers. We see a lot more activity now in the downsizer market. People are feeling a little bit more comfortable about, getting educated on the process and the steps needed to be taken in order to downsize from that family home into the smaller sort of right-sizing style home. Maybe comment on your experience.
Yeah, well, a few things at play there with downsizing we've noticed. One, people are staying in their homes longer. And so we're seeing some seniors who want to just stay in their home well into their late 80s and 90s, which we never used to see, or very rarely used to see. So that's one element where there's a few factors at play, and often we're dealing with those adult children of those seniors in helping guide them into things they should be thinking about in regards to staying in your home that long. And maintenance issues come up. They're tending not to want to renovate. They just want to keep the house maintained. But as they get into advanced age, sometimes the home maintenance slips, and then that can negatively affect the resale value on those homes. So I think it's educating homeowners and making sure they have a good support system if they're going to stay in their home to be able to maintain the home. And you've got some people who are on a fixed budget, just don't have money to maintain their home. So you see those homes that get run down, a lot of them in the West Island, that end up then becoming fodder for teardowns and new construction. So that whole market cycle, I think, is going to continue. But we've worked with some not so old downsizers, and I think they're strategic in their thinking and their planning, right? They've got, the kids have moved out. They're in a 3,000 or 2,500 square foot executive home, and the kids are off at university or they've started work, and they're saying, well, do the two of us really need this big house? And these are people in their 50s now, right? So these are people your age you're there. Like your kids are almost gone. Yeah. They're starting to say, like, do we stay in the big house or do we make a move, right? And so you've got different needs. You've got some who want to downsize but don't want to get really small. They maybe want to move into an area where they can have more walkability, more of a social life. Like what comes to mind often is Point Claire Village, kind of that village feel where they can walk around and get everything they need. A little bit of a different lifestyle, kind of a downtown lifestyle on the West Island, if you will.
Yeah.
But they still want a home where their kids can come with their significant others and future grandkids and have enough room for them. So they still need a slightly smaller home, but they still need some pretty big rooms. Less rooms, but still need big rooms. Maybe they still want to have the backyard and the basement for the home gym.
And storage is a big factor.
And storage. Then you have other downsizers who have a cottage or who have a place in Florida who say, I just want a pied-à-terre. So they're looking at something much smaller. So they may be looking at condos. They may be looking at little small cottages or small townhouses. And so that's a cool group to work with because I think they're sort of looking way ahead and deciding what do they want their lifestyle to be. They're still working, but they just want to downsize the home and have a different lifestyle, less house to maintain, less empty rooms. And so it's been cool to meet with them through the homeowner advisory sort of angle and sit down with them and try and educate people that are in that age bracket or in that situation that they should start to think about this move a year, 2 years, 3 years before they're actually ready to move, right? And I think you've just done that with clients. I've just done it with another set of clients for a year now, we've been preparing the home to get ready to sell. And we've also been actively looking at what's on the market, knowing that if something ideal comes up, we can jump on it. So we've gotten the financing piece, those ducks are in a row. We've started to tackle having the house inspected, ready to put on the market, tackle the punch list, all the different things that need repairs, have some painting done, have some staging type things, getting the house ready so that when that right house comes up, they're not scrambling and stressed going, oh my God, like how are we going to do this all so quickly? Because you know the house they want to buy, there's other people who want to buy it, and they got to be able to move quickly on it. Yeah. So all those moving parts, how do they execute that to have a good experience? So maybe you can explain a little bit about
so
a story on that.
Exactly. Two stories come to mind. One where they had initially thought maybe the condo is the right move. Right. And had made that decision. Yeah. It's a specific location that we want, like Point Claire Village in the heart of the action. But let's go after a condo.
And what was their age group and demographic?
The sort of the late 50s.
Late 50s, early 60s.
Yeah, exactly what you were just describing is still very active. And, kids have left and got the big home, as you mentioned, sort of not close to the action. Right. And wanting that downtown feel, but without being downtown.
Yeah. Still
want to be in the West Island. So, the financing part obviously was number one. How is this going to work? Is it mortgage? Is it line of credit? Is it, so we want to definitely buy before we sell. We want to know where we're going first otherwise, if we don't get this specific, property or area, we're just going to be staying put and waiting for something to come up. So talking that through with their mortgage broker or mortgage advisor, they got all that squared away and knew how that was going to work. Then it was sitting down and saying, well, how does the mechanics of these offers work in terms of buying and then selling? And to your point, getting their property ready to go, so that it would be ready to go on the market pretty quickly if they got an offer accepted on the purchase. Then it's just a million questions about just the mechanics of offers and how that happens and getting educated and knowing what to expect. That really helped them become more comfortable with that process. So back to our story about the downsizers and getting properly prepared, right? The financing component, obviously, number one. Number two is, getting their house prepared and ready. And that involves a ton of work. Let's not gloss that over, right? It could be a significant cost to clean all these things up could be deferred maintenance that they just had sort of
all the things
let go.
They're not major, but they're minor annoyances to a buyer. So it's like the strategy is, hey, let's get all this fixed. So when we put it on the market, buyer does their inspection or visits the house, there's just none of that outstanding. That's the way to do it, right? Tackle all that way in advance, and then you're going to get a better price. You'll sell quicker for more money and have no renegotiation.
And especially if your house has got you're on that sort of 10-year window on your renovations, right? You've got some things that a buyer in that price range would probably expect to come in and do new to their taste: kitchens, bathrooms, floors, things like that. That's what they want to spend their money on. They don't want to spend their money on, foundation cracks and caulking and, electrical boxes and things like that. So that would definitely be, and then you're focusing on the positives, not the negatives. Like the buyers come in there going, he's not sort of looking at things you haven't done. He's looking at things that you have done. And that's obviously gonna help. So that's number one. And then once you've got that, set and ready to go, then it's a question of, doing your homework and your due diligence on the property that you're going to buy. Because if it's a brand new condo, maybe it's going to be a little less, in terms of due diligence. But if you're talking about a property built in the 30s that you want to renovate, and
whole other ballgame.
Whoa, like we're talking about, going looking at the certificate of location and seeing that the detached garage that was built in 1936 is no longer adhering to today's bylaws for setbacks. Therefore, you can't, if you tear this down, you're not going to be able to put a new one back up in the same spot. So you're probably talking, instead of a 2-car garage, you now maybe be able to put up a 1-car garage, but nowhere near the same spot that would cut into your property. So all these things are not, and if you need to do major repairs on it, what's that going to cost? Like we had a structural engineer go in and look at the foundation. Well, he can't see the entire foundation. He sees certain parts of it. And his advice was, well, we don't know for sure until we've excavated and seen the whole foundation. So to a certain extent, you are taking a risk. You're taking a risk. So these are things we sit down and talk with our clients about is, do you have the stomach for this, first of all?
Yeah. The budget,
and knowing that things are going to go over budget, right? You can attest to that in terms of going through major renovations or new builds. And then if you've got your experts in, right? You've got your engineers, you've got your contractors, you've got them all lined up. You now have a very good idea of what it's going to cost to do the work you want to do. Well, then you basically are asking us, well, if I do all this work, what would the property be worth?
Yeah.
And then sort of reverse engineer back from there to say, well, if I had to turn around and sell this in a year or two, would I be
taking a massive loss, or am I going to be within range?
Exactly. Yeah. And that's going to help you make a more informed decision as to whether you're willing to take that on. They're probably planning on staying there for another 10, 15 years, which is great. Your market appreciation will definitely play in your favor there. But if you're really close to the edge there and something happens, well, there's a risk that you're going to take.
Yeah.
Anything to add to that in terms of, experience you've had with clients in terms of, downsizing and things that they weren't aware of that you sort of need to educate and coach them on?
Yeah, I think it can be a bit of a discovery process. They may think they want X and they end up buying Y. Like the clients I'm working with right now, they sold the big house and they said, we don't want to have the hassles of owning, we're going to go and rent. So we found them a fantastic rental in a very high-end condo building in a great location. They loved it. But 3-4 years into that rental, they realized it wasn't what they liked. They didn't want to be in the building anymore. So back to looking to buy, and had a problem with a landlord that can happen. Yeah. It wasn't a great experience for them. And they were spending quite a bit of money on rent. So they decided, hey, maybe we'll look at buying. So they were looking at buying another condo in the complex. They liked the location, just maybe a different condo. They wanted to be in a different building, in the different phase of the condo. And if that didn't work out, they were open to look at different things. So they thought condo all the way. Then they're driving down in a nice area, a little bit west of where they were, and happened upon an open house sign, walk in. walk into this townhouse that's a waterfront, fall in love, and go from wanting a condo apartment to now buying a townhouse that's got 4 levels: basement, main level, bedroom level, and a mezzanine. So go figure, right?
Yeah.
They love the view. They love the feeling of being there. They say looked out the backyard, say it's like being at the cottage, and so that was great for them. They're happy now. They're going to be spending less than they were on rent, and they're homeowners again.
But they were informed and they did their homework.
Yeah, I mean it wasn't an easy one too. This was during our due diligence process, we learned that there were some issues with the building and the city. There was some back and forth there over some sewage connections of the project. There was some what we call poly B, which is like a Kitech kind of plumbing pipe.
And what's wrong with that? What's the
Well,
issue?
there's been some class action lawsuits that they've had where some of those poly B connections have failed.
Right.
So if your main plumbing pipe going through the house fails, you could have a huge flood. So before making the offer, we were doing a ton of due diligence. We were calling insurance companies. Would we be able to get insurance on this house if there's poly B in there? And insurance companies were saying no, like you won't be able to get insurance.
Mm-hmm.
So then it's like, would the seller be open to removing this poly B plumbing? And the seller's like, no, I'm going into a retirement home. I don't want to have to deal with this. I just want to sell the property. So then it's like getting a quote from the plumber and figuring out how to remove this type of pipe and replace it. And what's the cost of this dispute with the city and the condo association over this sewage situation? There's an unknown cost there. So again, to your point, like sitting down with them and assessing, here's some of the risk, some of the exposure you might be encountering when you become an owner, and taking that into consideration in the offer and negotiating the offer price down, taking those things into account. And they were very happy with the price that they got. And there you go. They're going to do the work. The poly B plumbing is not a big deal because they plan on painting the whole unit anyway. Right. So they have to open some walls, do some plaster, and they're going to paint anyway. So it didn't add a huge amount. It was actually less expensive than we anticipated it to be when we got the quotes back. So
there again is the value of having an advisor in your corner to walk you through all those things that otherwise you wouldn't be aware of.
Yeah.
And you wouldn't be asking those questions.
Yeah.
And how about upsizers? Because there's in reverse, it's just as complicated in terms of managing 2 transactions. Only this time it's from the smaller home to the bigger home, and oftentimes young families, they've got different challenges than downsizers.
Yeah, the upsizing, the pieces of that puzzle are very different, even more challenging, because typically an upsizer as a young family still has a mortgage. So they're not in a position where they can go and buy a house cash before they've sold theirs, or even get a mortgage on the second house and while they still have the first mortgage. So they're in a position where they have to usually sell first, not know where they're going yet, put a closing a few months out, and hope that they can find their next home. And if they're upsizing because they've outgrown their home and they want something nicer and bigger and a better location generally. And they don't just want to move, like they could stay in their home, so they're only going to move for the ideal home. So that's a real catch-22. You have a lot of people that think about upsizing and end up deciding it's not for them, because if they put their house for sale and sell it and they don't find their ideal next home, they got to compromise. Either they got to compromise and go buy a home that they didn't really love. We hear from people who've done that and regret it. Or they've got to pick up their family with their kids and they've got to move twice. They've got to go into a rental for a year. After they've sold their house and before they can find their next dream home. And a lot of people just aren't willing to do that either. So there's a lot of pain involved in upsizing. Unless you're lucky enough that you've got the financial means to buy your next house before selling yours.
Or sometimes they're fortunate that they've got parents who can loan them the money.
Well, that's financial means. I
Yeah.
mean, if they've got that kind of, which is very few people have the kind of money to do that.
Just to show that they've got the funds to make the purchase, and then hopefully sell their house, because that's what happened to one of our clients. Is they had a parent who was able to co-sign for the purchase with the financial means to cover the purchase price, and then we had to get their house on the market immediately and hopefully sell it and time those dates so that they would get the money from their sale before they had to close on their purchase, and then they could remove the parent from the offer.
But huge risk, and not
Yep.
a lot of people are willing to take that risk. What if their house doesn't sell? Then mom and dad are on the hook to buy the new house for them.
Yep.
And then they're going to have to, they're under the gun to sell their house. They might accept less than what they hoped. The whole thing can unravel. So that is a discovery meeting with a client who's thinking of upsizing, that you have to point out a lot of possible pain points.
So I was just about to say, the importance of the discovery meeting cannot be understated. And we normally do discovery meetings and consultation meetings with buyers and with sellers, but especially when it's that move up buyer, those really getting them to understand the buy process as well as the sales process and how those two need to be coordinated. That
extremely complex.
Very complex, and people need to be walked through that very carefully so they understand exactly what they're doing. And then make sure, as you said, having their house ready to go, because if they don't have the financial means and they need to make a conditional offer, the first question we ask as listing brokers, if somebody's making conditional offer on our property, is what?
Is their house ready to go? Have you priced it competitively?
Is it on the market?
Is it market?
Yeah.
And again, even the conditional offer, like depending on where their house is located and the price range of the house they want to buy, if that market is relatively active, the chances of getting a conditional offer accepted are very slim. Like, it's very hard to get a conditional offer accepted as a buyer on a move-up home, because most sellers are not too excited about accepting a conditional offer. They would rather wait for something firm.
Well, yeah, but it depends on how long that house has been on the market. Is there a lot of competition? If there's not a lot of competition and your offer is very attractive, then a seller is going to be more likely to take that chance.
Well,
and when they know that the seller's house is in tip-top shape, ready to go, they've done their pre-listing inspection, they've priced it.
Buyer's house, you mean?
The buyer's house.
Yeah.
The buyer has done their due diligence, that their house is ready to go. They've done, they've got some great marketing. They've got a great realtor who's ready to really rock and roll with that. Well, that's going to make them feel a lot more confident.
Oh yeah, absolutely. We've been on the other side of the table representing a seller, and someone comes in with a conditional offer, and you're asking these questions like, is the house ready to go? Has it been staged? Has it been inspected? Has it been priced properly? Are you comfortable with the listing price? When's it ready to go on the market? If we don't get positive answers to those, we're looking at our seller saying, no, don't accept this one.
Yeah.
So it's all about being prepared, having the strategy in place, and executing on it with the help of a savvy broker, obviously.
Yeah, exactly. Well, those are all really good tips for upsizers, downsizers.
Yeah, the upsizers, I think the biggest misconception from the public out there is, oh no, I'll just make my offer conditional on selling my house. Like, that'll be easy. People don't realize all of the different little hurdles you have to go over, the hoops you have to jump through to try and make that work.
And it's even more important to be very realistic about your sale price, right? Because you're not going to have a lot of time, and you're gonna need to make sure that you've priced it correctly in order to sell in that small window of opportunity.
Yeah. If you want to upsize and you have to sell to buy your next house financially, you have to be a very committed, motivated client.
Yeah, and you have to be conservative on your sale price and conservative on your purchase price. Because if the gap between those two is too large, you may not be able to do it, right? So you've got your pre-approval letter on your purchase, and you're gonna basically base that upon what you're gonna get for your house.
You're gonna pay more.
Yeah.
We have to explain that to people. You're making a conditional offer. It's got to have to be a better offer than if it was non-conditional.
Yeah.
So you're gonna pay extra for your house, and then you're gonna be under the gun to sell yours. And during the time that you have your conditional offer in place and you're trying to sell your home, if another offer comes in, the seller can accept it, remove conditions on the second offer, come back to you and say, I've now got a second offer on the house. You've got your house on the market, and you get a notice saying you've got 72 hours to remove your condition, or your offer is null and void. You've done all that work, and you're back to square one.
Yeah.
So that's what I mean. You've got to be extremely motivated and very aware of the entire process before you undertake the upsize.
But then you've also got the second buyer putting in that offer in second position. needs to also understand they're taking some risk too, because they've got to fulfill all their conditions. So they got to spend money doing their inspection, getting their financing approval,
Of course.
and then only to potentially lose it themselves if the first buyer clears their condition and either gets an accepted firm offer on their house, or then a family member comes into the rescue at the last minute and puts up the funds.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if you'd like to get more insights and recommendations and tips on the local market, understand what's happening in all the different price ranges like we've talked about today, whether you're a first-time home buyer, upsizer, downsizer, what are they going to do, Shawnee?
Well, I think they should reach out to us and book a discovery meeting. We can walk people through the things we've discussed today. We've just touched the tip of the iceberg. There's a ton of things that people need to learn about. The process seems complicated and scary, but when you start break it down and become an educated buyer or seller, you're going to feel a lot more comfortable about it.
Yeah, it's a journey. It's a journey, right? It's like climbing a mountain. You've got to be well prepared. You need to have the right equipment. You need to have the right guide or Sherpa who's telling you about the risks and obstacles in your path, and making sure that before you get to that final ascent, you've got all your ducks in a row.
Yeah. Because
that will avoid stress. It will avoid disappointment in getting caught unprepared.
Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah.
So another thing people can do is subscribe to this podcast wherever you get your podcasts, on Apple Podcasts, Spotify. You can also subscribe to our YouTube channel.
Yeah.
For all of these, podcast interviews with local experts, and as well as your very informative market updates that you do on a quarterly basis.
Yeah. Next one will be coming out soon. We're almost at the end of June. Also wanted to just explain our Homeowners Advisory Club for people that aren't aware of that program. It's free for people to join. You can sign up through our website. We'll put the contact information below this video on YouTube, on our social media as well. And what that offers you is access to the content, of course. And I think the most important piece is our advice. We'll come over to your house if you're thinking of doing a renovation, or you're thinking of aging in place, or you're contemplating selling and upsizing to a bigger home, and what are the things you should be doing to get your home ready? What are renovations that are going to return the most investment, the most return on your investment? So some people put money in the wrong places, so we'll advise you on that. There's no charge for it. And what's the number one thing that people love to get from us?
Our directory of trusted service providers. Yeah.
So we've had a lot of those people on the podcast. We just did one with Olivier Caron, contractor. That was super interesting. I learned a lot.
Yeah, I can't wait for that one.
So people that are contemplating doing a major renovation or a home addition or extension, Olivier would be an example of someone in the directory that we would recommend who has a great business philosophy, is well respected in the industry, and delivers what he says he's going to deliver to clients. Like he talked today about being able to actually hit a timeline, and how that is key. And you hear that from horror stories of contractors where timeline overruns. He's like, no, I plan the whole thing and I can hit my timeline exactly. Yeah. 9 times out of 10.
Yeah.
Very, very accurately.
And I cannot understate or overstate enough, the value of these relationships, because I've experienced it myself with my clients just recently, where we've made an offer on a property, we've seen the inspection report, and we need to get some quotes to be able to renegotiate that offer. And we've been getting turnaround times like literally within 12 hours from our electricians, from our foundation experts, from our plumbers. And so that is critical to be able to, again, close on a property and transaction, as well as being able to get your property ready to go on the market within a window,
and be able to properly maintain your property over time. So you maybe say, I'm going to stay in my house for the next 20 years. What are the things you should be doing to maintain it, improve its value, and increase its saleability when the time does come 20 years down the road? So that's advice that I think is invaluable for a lot of homeowners. We've met with a lot of people who just want to hear from a professional about what they should
Yeah,
be doing.
exactly. And this is no pressure to buy or sell. Like, that's not what this is all about. This is about, giving people the information they need, which they deserve to have access to, even if they're not planning on buying or selling today. So thanks very much, Sean. That was super interesting stuff we got into today.
Yeah, it was fun. Dug into a lot of stuff.
Yeah, so we'll catch you on the next one.
All right.